All right, let's look at the proof of product rule. All right, so let's do that. All right, so product rule goes like this, and everyone knows by now, right? If you have f of x times g of x, if you take the derivative of the product, you're going to do f prime of x times g of x plus f times g prime of x. All right, where did that come from? All right. So since we don't really have any other clever tools, we just go back to the definition. All right. So what's the definition of what would be the definition of derivative of f of x times g of x? All right. So let's write down the definition. All right. So definition, limit definition, right? So we take the limit as h approaches 0. Right? Then we just have to write down the difference quotient here. All right, so the difference quotient would be, all right, first we plug in x plus h. So you have f of x plus h times g of x plus h. Then minus the original function, which is f of x times g of x. And all over h. All right, so here's the definition. All right. Since we already know what we're supposed to get, so somehow we have to create the f prime times g of x plus f times g prime of x. All right. So remember that I just wrote down the f prime and g prime, the definitions of those, so that we can recognize. So we should get these difference quotient with the limit, right? All right, so let's try to kind of squeeze that expression out of what we have. All right, so this is going to be, right, so limit, I'm going to take care of this limit later, so just copy that as h approaches 0. All right, so I'm going to do the add and subtract trick, right? So I'm going to have f of x plus h and g of x plus h, right? So I already used that, so this is we already have that, right? And I'm gonna maybe give a little bit of room, and I'm gonna put minus f of x times g of x here, right? And that takes care of that. And of course, there's h on the bottom, so maybe I should put that in there. All right, so I just gave a little bit of extra space. All right, so let's pay attention to this. So we know that here we want to have f of x plus h minus f of x. So we're going to need that to create f prime. So I'm going to squeeze that in. So we already have f of x plus h. So I'm going to subtract f of x, right? Then I'm going to put exactly the same thing so that we can pull it out. So you have a g of x plus h, right? Then here we're going to add right here. Actually, I'm going to move this a little bit here. Let's see, how do I move this? All right, I'm going to actually give a little bit of one more space there. So I'm going to just move it right at the end, right? And then I'm going to add and subtract trick, or subtract and add trick in this case, f of x and g of x plus h. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to split this big fraction into two smaller ones. I'm going to group these guys together first. And then I'm going to group the last two guys together. All right, see what we get. All right, so this is going to be equal to, all right, so we have a limit as h approaches 0. All right. Then I guess I'm going to put a big, let's say maybe put a big curly bracket or something. All right. So we have, so look at these first two terms. We have g of x plus h is in common. So what we can do is I'm going to actually pull that out. So you have, I'm going to pull it out here, g of x plus h. All right. So these two guys all pulled out and became 1 here, right? Then what's left on top is obviously f of x plus h minus f of x, which is exactly what we wanted. All right, we still have a h on the bottom, so I'm going to put an h there. All right, so that's if you put the first 2 terms together, we're going to get that. All right, plus, how about the second 2 terms together? All right, so you can see that there's a f of x here, and there's another f of x. So we have a common factor, so we can pull those guys out. So we have f of x is sitting here, and what's left is, luckily, g of x plus h from here, and a minus g of x. And don't forget that we're still dividing by h. Right? I guess we can put a square bracket instead of the curly bracket. All right, so I'm gonna do that. All right, so we have that. All right, then we know where everyone goes. All right, look at this first part. What would be the limit of this difference quotient, f of x plus h minus f of x over h? That's precisely the definition of f prime. So when you take the derivative, when you take the limit, and this guy approaches f prime of x, right? Here, g is a continuous function because it's the differentiable already. As h approaches 0, h is going to disappear. So this second factor, this factor is going to approach just the g of x because h basically goes away, right? And in this case, f of x stays the same because it has nothing to do with h. And here, limit of this difference quotient is precisely the definition of g prime of x. So this guy is going to approach g prime of x. All right, so therefore, you get exactly what we wanted. We have a first guy goes to f prime of x times g of x and plus f of x times g prime of x. Right? That is how the product rule came about. All right, that's it. I hope that this was clear.